prepare the people. And I now understand that men's hearts failing them for fear of looking after those things coming upon the earth.
Well, just imagine that suddenly something is open. Is this man's technology? Is this something else? Something is opened, and there are hundreds of millions of these things, literally racing over, crawling over the earth. Men's hearts failing them for fear is not is not a stretch of the imagination. I read. I want to ask you about this one too. I read where there was a 23-foot tall skeleton that was discovered in the 1400s beside a river in Valence, France. This is out of a good book of archaeology. Have you ever read about that?
Yes, and can I share something? The actual articles, the actual writings from all these guys through the ages, they have central truths that are carried through, and they're unknown to each other, okay? So somebody's writing in Europe versus someone who's writing in Asia in centuries apart and coming up with their own, if you will, giants that are fitting the criteria of 6 fingers, 6 toes, and 19 to 23 feet tall, or 36 feet tall. The point is that the reference that most human beings have is what I would say the NBA scale, okay? If you're, I don't know who the tallest basketball player was, but let's say 7'6" or something, The point is 8 feet, doesn't matter. What we're talking about is individuals of supernatural strength, supernatural appetite. Joshua and Caleb going to the promised land, they said the land devours its inhabitants. We are as grasshoppers in our own sight, or in their sight, and so we were in ours. You see the classic picture, the woodcut of Joshua and Caleb carrying a cluster of grapes, and they're carrying it on their shoulders between a stave. The thing is, every place I looked, as I've been researching these for 3.5 decades, Tom, every place I look, it doesn't matter what part of the world, it doesn't matter what culture, it doesn't matter if I go to Polynesia, it doesn't matter if I go to Antarctica, it doesn't matter if I go to, when I say go, the reports coming out of that before it was frozen over, you've got this central theme, and it's the Rosetta Stone of history. It explains architecture, it explains science, it explains even war, it explains a desire to destroy. Jesus said he's come that we might have life and have it more abundantly. There's a reason. By the way, I was going to say, Oppenheimer, remember, one of the scientists involved in the Manhattan Project, development of the atomic bomb, said he had become the destroyer of worlds.
Right.
He was saying, he was quoting the very quote that he was basically the destroyer. In other words, he put it into Hindu mythology too. And isn't it fascinating that Hindu mythology talks about, if you will, prehistoric nuclear war?
Well, and I know we only have a few minutes, but I would also want to add that for people who only look at the Bible, in Deuteronomy, it talks about the bed of Og, the king of Bashan, who was 9 cubits by 4 cubits. But in our thinking, this is something like a bed that was 14 feet long and 6 feet wide. So imagine, Steve, if the earth was suddenly overrun by millions of these things that are as tall or taller than a telephone pole, and yet the Bible seems to indicate that this is prophetic. In other words, it is going to happen. It is going to occur. This is extraordinary. Do you think, Steve, that the end times army of Joel, in Joel 2:111, where he talks about this great army, do you think that's talking about an unleashing or an opening of a doorway or something, and there is this monstrous, million-numbered hive of giants coming upon the earth in the last days? Do you think that's what Joel's talking about?
I think it very well is, and I think the thing is that I see the supernatural aspect of this, Tom, unfolding at such an accelerated pace now, because again, the key was that, and I want to share something. You and I started talking about transhumanism together a number of years ago. Before you and I talked about it, it was like this stuff, as you know, what Ventnor was doing, there'd be, I'd say, intermittent, brief postings, but it wasn't in your face. When you and I first started talking about it, and some of the other stuff we started talking about, now you start talking about, obviously, the unfolding, what's going on in the UFO world. Now, are you amazed even at how much stuff is out there? Because
it's extraordinary.
To keep up on it is like a full-time job, and quite candidly, my prayer is that those who fight these things will give the information how to fight them. Now, the Native Americans fought the giants. They got them in caves. They suffocated them. But there's two different realms. There's the fallen angel aspect, and obviously angels can't be killed. They can be bound. So God's going to have to raise up His supernatural warriors. I also believe that's the ministry of the two witnesses, because it would take someone with the supernatural faith of Enoch, who was given the keys to the universe and understanding, and Elijah to be able to handle this stuff. And somebody sent me an email, well, what's the ministry of Enoch and Elijah? Well, obviously to confront the Antichrist. And the Antichrist, let me share this, whether people want to believe this or not, the Antichrist was interviewed by someone I know, and I'm talking about the man who claims to be, and the man who claims to be the Antichrist said, very soon, here's the words, my brethren who have been in chains will be leased, and the world will be ours. Okay? Now, I didn't listen to, as you probably know, I don't take hallucinogenic drugs, but I listen to people that have enough stars on their shoulders that people would basically couldn't say above their pay grade, because there is no pay grade higher. Okay? And so what I'm saying to you is that I believe that we are at the precipice of that. I think it's going to be very, very important for people to pray about this. And ladies and gentlemen, while Tom is with me, I would encourage everybody to get a hold of Steve Melching. This show will be available on my website. Obviously, it's going to be available on your website. But please, whatever you do, ladies and gentlemen, please download this, record it, print it out, but keep it for a future date, because it will help you. And Tom, I know what God's doing right now. He's basically, in His mercy, His love, and His intervention, He's giving people the antidote for fear, and that is the words of Jesus. And I tell you this, there is nothing other than that that's going to keep us. Nothing.
Well, how much more time do we have left in the show?
We got about 10 minutes.
Okay. Well, it was Ronald Reagan himself, and he said this on several occasions. He also said this in front of the United Nations. He talked about how a sudden threat, extraterrestrial threat, unhuman threat, would bring together all humanity into a single world order, a unified world effort to resist or battle this common extraordinary foe. And as astonishing as it seems, something of this nature, Steve, could happen at any moment. Tomorrow the CERN is going to be turned on. There's other inventions that are occurring all around us. There is the opportunity for a great deception to be suddenly compelled on earth by the appearance of what seems to be extraordinary forces, whether it's a hive of hundreds of millions of giants suddenly coming through something upon the earth, or an armada of UFOs, or you mentioned earlier, the work that's done by David Flynn, maybe a planetoid-sized mothership zooming down upon Earth. Look, consider this week the news, the discovery where there's an object. Did you see this in the icy Kuiper belt?
Yes.
And it's orbiting the sun, but it's orbiting backwards.
Retrograde.
Yeah, and the astronomers in the article actually said that, it could have been born elsewhere. That kind of stuck out to me. Born elsewhere. Yep. Elsewhere. What's that mean? Outside of our solar system, outside of our galaxy. Whatever it is, it's the largest unidentified flying object ever seen. It's 31 miles wide. The mainstream news, scientists are talking about it being potentially a comet, but there's no way that they know that, because it's only a blur that's showing up on their screen. As far as we know, it could be a gigantic spaceship. We don't know what it is. But what we do know is it's flying in the opposite direction of all planets, and it appears to be powered by itself. And why that's interesting in a theological discussion about how a satanic or alien conspiracy could suddenly come upon and overwhelm mankind is this accepted theology concerning Lucifer, including the possibility that the location from which he fell from was a star system, a planetoid. In fact, I would also want to let people know that, unless you've run out, I believe you have copies of David Flynn's book.